Hi, my name is Christopher Allen. I've been in the digital media and entertainment space for about 20 years and just want to share with you a few of my thoughts around theatrical and home entertainment. So, hope you enjoy. Theatrical and home entertainment snapshot. So, the intent of this is just to give you a little bit of a background about theatrical, home entertainment, where it currently is, and what are some of the emerging things that are happening in the marketplace. So, when you look at the theater attendance over the past years, it's been, in general, in a decline, right? Peaking around 2002, attendance has been on a general downtrend. However, 2018 will probably see a slight uptick. If you look at 2017, it's around 1.25, I think, billion movie admissions. I think 2018 will end around 1.3, maybe a little bit higher. But in general, the meta trend is a little downward. And part of that is due to fewer new big releases from the major six studios. You see that has also kind of declined over the years, where they're making fewer big release, wide release movies. Other studios are starting to creep up, but the big movie releases have also kind of lended itself to a hit-driven business. So when you take a look over the past decade or so, this is a graph of the top 10 movies as a percent of the domestic theatrical box office. So when you look at this, over the last decade, the top 10 movies have gone from around 26% of the total box to almost 35% of the total box. So it's clearly a hit-driven business. And you see big titles really dominating the landscape. So we look at the major studio market share for 2018 through the bulk of the year. Disney at about 27%, Universal, Warner, Sony, Fox, and here's some of the big titles for each of those movies. When you look at Disney and its acquisition of Fox, that's going to get them close to 40% of the box office, and some major franchises as part of that portfolio. So clearly, that trend toward consolidation continues. And when we look at these content creators, we look at some of these guys, they look, big companies, big market capitalization. And this is prior to acquisitions. But when you put this in perspective of some of the new technology distribution platforms and media giants in the marketplace, there's the red line, shows the previous slide with Disney and others down below. There are some big juggernauts that are likely heading into the space and are looking to capitalize on video content and figure out strategies to grow that as part of their arsenal and their portfolio. So these slides were inspired by Rich Greenfield of BTIG Research. Check him out. He follows this space religiously, as myself. And it was just a really interesting way to capture the magnitude of companies that are wading into this space non-trivially. So what are some of the things, and this is the same slide, impacting theater attendance? And clearly there's been a plethora of new, both at-home, social media growth. Here you just see a number of representative logos of companies that are clearly vying for consumers' time, and that's really what it is. It's whether it's you're consuming free media across Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, wherever, or subscription media like Netflix and Hulu and some of the others. It's really around what is the consumer looking to view at any point in time, whether it's on their phone, on their tablet, on the go, on an airplane, at home, on their big screen. What are they trying to consume? And in often cases, it's multiple. It's watching Netflix while checking up on your Instagram feed. Multi-screen efforts are more and more commonplace, but clearly, at the end of the day, there's only so much time. And so these have, I believe, started to erode into, do I go out and see a movie, or is the experience on my 72-inch QLED TV in my living room with some of the quality of the content that's coming out of these services good enough? The other thing that has, I think, impacted box office is a shorter film lifespan. So when you look at a franchise like Jurassic Park and its subsequent title releases, I think there's a couple interesting things to note here, right? Across at least these three representative titles in 93, 2015, 2018. The first is a theatrical run. So 70 weeks. 1993, 70 weeks. I was a much younger version of myself. And being in the theater for over a year, that's incredible. And fast forward to summer of 2018, 15 weeks, Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, in and out of theaters pretty quickly. That said, the global box office has still been huge and across all of the titles. But I think one of the other trends that you start to see is a growing proportion of the global box from non-domestic, right? So when you look at the ratios of those over time, more and more of the proceeds are coming from overseas theatrical runs. The other thing that's impacting movies is there's really no place for a bad movie to hide. I think the transparency in social media and the Rotten Tomatoes and some of these Metacritic scores and things like that have started to give consumers just more information about making good choices for movies that they'd like to see, or movies that maybe they should avoid or wait until they come out on home entertainment. But it still drives people in their decision making as they look at these other data sources, particularly from trusted friends, on social media. The other thing that's also interesting is kind of story length, and there's been so much emphasis on binge watching. I think the Wall Street Journal just had an article this morning, December 7th, around 76% of adults 18 to 29 prefer to binge watch or look forward to binge watching. And so you look at some of the the story arcs of some of the big releases this year, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. But when you look at things like Stranger Things, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, from Netflix and Amazon respectively, these are much, much longer story arcs, much longer and more in-depth opportunities to get character development, plot advancement, multiple plots going on at the same time, and deeper customer engagement. Even Stranger Things, they did a spin-off right beyond Stranger Things, where they just interviewed cast members and showed other clips, and that was like a 7-part series after Stranger Things 2, I think. Well, we're all, and I'm a big Stranger Things fan, waiting for season 3. Anytime, Netflix. There's also clearly economic disruptors. So you've got YouTube, massive reach, free videos. They've also layered on a subscription service that's had some traction, but the free clearly dominates Netflix. They have clearly established themselves as the leader in subscription services. And then you also have Amazon Prime, which is a different model, right? They still offer video, but the model is encompassed within Amazon Prime, which includes delivery services, Kindle lending, and things tied to their other products in the Amazon ecosystem. And so the distribution model is just a little different with Amazon and video. So just picking an example, Netflix continues to ramp. This is the same kind of attendance in the blue, with the blue line, the same attendance decline over the last 15 or so years, and the pretty phenomenal growth of Netflix. I think they're going to close out 2018 with around 60 billion domestic subs. That's what is depicted here, and about 135 million global subs. So clearly a juggernaut, growing tremendously, and a strong foothold in the space, but not without its own challenges that we'll talk about in a bit too. But the long tail, when you get to these subscription services, you look at all the content that's offered, and many of you have seen this graph of the long tail, and it's very similar to the big releases drive the box office. You have highly popular stuff that's kind of popular, and then stuff that's niche, sub-niche, micro-niche. And the hits, obviously, those are the no-brainer, but the plethora of content that's out there and the discovery tools and opportunities to find the movies that you're going to like is still very, very difficult. And again, Netflix, with its years of data and viewing. So not just selection, not just liking, not just saying I want to go see this movie. This is actual consumption of movies, TV shows, and they've got data that is probably unrivaled at this point for direct-to-consumer data on media and TV and movie entertainment. And even they're challenged, right, with identifying what's going to be the best match for you and what will be the best recommendation for you. And, you know, given their business strategy, do they recommend a Netflix original or do they recommend a movie that is licensed from another studio, or both? And how they do that, and contextually how they do that, is important to their business models. You see the same thing with like mobile app stores, right, where you've got hundreds of thousands and millions of apps, and the number of apps that you actually use on your phone. So you have the apps that are in the store, then you have the ones that you actually download that you think you might want to use. Then you have the apps that you actually use on your phone, which is literally a handful of apps. I know on my phone I probably use 20%, 25% of the apps like regularly, and then the rest are just along for the ride on the phone. And as a result, the library, the library content, loses a little bit of its value because it's just too tough to discover. It's too tough to find. We're just swimming in a sea of so much content that the discoverability of that is just really, really difficult. Again, Netflix probably best of breed in helping people find that, but there, could be an opportunity. So as you look at that, though, and people have seen this opportunity, you have this emergence over the years of many SVOD kind of niche service providers. And some of these on this chart have come and gone. Some are still there. And I think, again, this is just a sampling, a representative of a number of services that have launched in specific niches. But the interesting takeaway from this chart is that despite the number of services and micro niches of SVOD, subscription video on demand content, 95% of the subscribers are controlled by 4 companies, and that's Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, and HBO in the macro, right? So when you look at that, there's a lot of people competing for the 5%, or to try and, if they could, claw into that 95%. But those 4 brands, and brands do matter, have a pretty strong foothold on SVOD. So in the past, content has always been, there's that argument is content king, distribution king, and probably the scales in the past tipped toward content. Distribution is still important, but when you look at a portfolio, as this example of Disney, pretty impressive array of content. But I think as new models have started to emerge, I think what you're starting to see is that access to consumers, direct access to consumers, and direct access to consumer data are 2 things that are going to be increasingly important. They're going to be massive drivers of success. And I think as a result, you start to see a lot of emerging platforms, and a lot of those big juggernauts that we saw on the previous market cap slides are saying, hey, I'm going to get into this direct-to-consumer space because it's hugely valuable. I've got a ton of content. I can monetize, or at very least leverage the data to make my service better and more engaging for consumers. So let's just take a look at, you've got some of these that have emerged in the past. So you've got NBC Sports Gold and Premier League, Netflix Prime Video. I'll just put these up. There's a little bit of baseline. These have all launched in the past. They are have space carved out. But you've got ESPN that just launched in the spring of 2018. They're going to continue to add more and more content to that subscription service. You've got SiriusXM, particularly with Howard Stern and their video services. They're offering that as part of their tiered content offering, so they're getting into the video space. Bleacher Report with Europa League, Champions League, they are starting to get into live. Cinedigm launched its Chinese content of television and movies called Bamboo. That's coming out next year. Of course, Apple, and this is kind of rumored that they're coming out in 2019 with a service. They spent, somewhere around $1 billion in content, but I think Apple's got a lot of the components clearly to make a big splash in the space. Remember, they have Texture, which is their digital media subscription service for magazines and print media. They've got Apple Music, which is continuing to gain inroads against Spotify. And remember, Apple's model, for the most part through the years, has been to kind of lock you into their system with hardware and make that ecosystem just work really, really well. And so when you look at the pieces that they have with the Texture, with Apple Music, with TV and movie services, or Apple, media services, what they can do from a subscription and bundling with hardware and software services could be, very interesting. Obviously, something to keep an eye out for. Quibi, which is Katzenberg, Meg Whitman is the CEO, launching, and there's a number of other investors. They've raised over $1 billion for quick bite short form entertainment. Warner Media has also announced they're coming out with a subscription service probably in the latter half of 2019 with a lot of their assets. Again, a lot of people lately in the news, the Netflix $100 million Friends deal has been in the news. And whether or not, but again, with the data, Netflix knew what the value of that service was to them, their business, and their customers. But likely, we'll see if Warner pulls that back or makes it non-exclusive down the road. And then I always like this logo. I'll replace it with the official logo of Disney Plus. Disney coming out with their direct-to-consumer service sometime toward the latter half of 2019. And it looks to be they have a war chest of content, and depending on how they do their channels with their movies, it could be a huge driver of consumer adoption. So the question, though, for the consumer is, at some point, how many is too many? A lot of people, there are complementary services where there's Netflix and YouTube TV, or Netflix and ESPN Plus and Disney Plus. We'll see how those scenarios play out and how they emerge. But at some point, the consumer, potentially, there could be a consumer backlash from consumers trying to manage too many of the subscription services and feeling like, man, I'm signing up for 6-8 subscription services. It's costing me more than I was paying for cable back in the day. Still don't think that's going to change the trend. This is clearly the trend versus the cable for right now. But the question will be, how much is too much? You also have, in this same vein, you have companies that are emerging to build theatrical movie subscription services. So the most famous from a press standpoint is MoviePass. You've also got Cinemia. And then you've got the theatrical exhibitors. Several of the U.S. have launched their own subscription services, Cinematic Movie Club and AMC with their Stubbs A-List program. This is probably a whole separate video to talk a little about this. It's a very interesting space. I think it's going to be difficult for the non-theatrical exhibitors to really disintermediate here, because they really don't have, from a cost structure and from a product offering perspective, they don't have too much wiggle room to really add a ton of value. So I think you're starting to see, like, MoviePass is starting to look closer and closer to Cinemia in terms of their product offering. We'll see if they continue to make it, but I think clearly there's an opportunity here, particularly for frequent moviegoers. And there's always the fear of cannibalization. Will that drive theatrical attendance down? But I actually do believe that these services combined are a contributing factor toward the increased attendance in 2018, for good or for bad. And you can say, hey, the MoviePass has paid a dear price for fueling a lot of that customer growth in theatrical attendance. But nonetheless, the market did respond with, when consumers are given the option to see more movies at some price, they will go. And finally, I think there's an opportunity. We've talked a little bit about home entertainment, theatrical, to potentially combine these and potentially have an offering that combines kind of an on-demand, all-you-can-eat at-home service with an in-theater subscription offering too. Kind of the best of both worlds. So you get the absolute latest and greatest, and you can also enjoy tons of great content on your massive flat screen in your living room. So thank you. If you have any ideas, concerns, comments, questions, criticisms, ideas, any of those things, please let me know in the comments below or shoot me a DM. And thanks for watching.